Hello and welcome to Skeindeer Knits. My name is Ellie and I am a Norwegian living and knitting in London. And you can find me on Instagram as Skeindeer, and I am a designer called Skeindeer Knits on Ravelry. And I also have my Ravelry group Skeindeer Knits, which is the best place to take part in knit-alongs and giveaways and the Skeindeer Knits community and getting in touch and all those things. As I always say, I'm, super busy with the PhD and stuff like that, so I am not shall we say, on top of my inboxes, but I do pay close attention to that group. So if there's anything you want to say, you can put that in the group. And of course, comments down below if you just have anything you want to say in regards to the videos that I make here. That's nothing new to you if you are returning viewers, and if you are, welcome back. And if you're a new viewer, welcome to my knitting talk show. This is where I talk about knitting for about an hour or so, usually on a weekly basis, but I tend to go bi-weekly in the summer because reasons. I want to first and foremost just thank you all so much for receiving my new summer collection so well. So in the last episode I launched 4 new patterns in one go. You can buy them individually or as a whole set. They do belong to the set, which is called Skeindeer Scandinavian Summer, and everything starts with S, and it's not cringy. So we have the, I'm going to show you, why not, they're still here, just for a bit of a recap, right, so we got the Solskin socks. And we have them, still a bit too scared of wearing them because I'm like, but they're so beautiful and blocked and just presentable. Yeah, and they're made out of Caesura, which is a hand-dyed company in Norway. I have the Solé tank made in Bomullin by Caesura. And I've actually washed it twice because I wear it so much, and it does actually not even get stinky in the summer. I'm not sure how that works because I know I sweat like a pig when I wear this, because of me, not because of this, because this is the lightest, least warm thing that I own in my wardrobe, and it doesn't seem to catch any smell, which is TMI maybe, but maybe you're also happy to know that, I don't know. Yeah, so it's made in Bomullin by Caesura. It's a tank top that has apparently a bit of a dust here. I wear this a lot. It's just, yeah, love the construction and just stuff and things and reasons, things you heard last episode. And I did the Solverv shawl slash wrap slash scarf, which is very long because I wanted it to go around me like so, and it does. And lastly we have the Solvik shirt, which drapes so beautifully when wearing it. I'm just Anyway, I wasn't going to toot my own horn right away. I just wanted to thank you all so much for receiving that collection so well. I've never done a summer collection before. It's very much outside of my comfort zone, but every time I do get outside of my comfort zone, I kind of expand, the barriers around the skill set that I have, and I sort of find myself being able to do other things, and I feel a lot less limited in the type of garments and accessories that I am now capable of designing, and it's really fun, and I'm so inspired to make all these other things. I even actually sat up until really late 2 nights ago just developing this cardigan pattern I struggled with for a long time to make add up, and it does now. It's gonna be a bottom-up one for a change, but it's gonna have a lot of steeks, and it's gonna be great. Yeah. So that's the thing I had to cast on, but we're not going to talk about that today because I haven't made a lot of progress that's particularly visible. I do want to quickly go through the knit-alongs that I'm running before I get into all the stuff that I have knitted on since last time. I am running the Kosekofte decal. I have just talked to people in the Ravelry group about that, and I think we're going to just keep it going, maybe until the end of the year, because it's where we're going to make my rather large Kosekofte pattern, which is a very involved piece of work. Like it's fairly quick, but it's big and heavy and maybe not so inviting to work on when it's summer in the northern hemisphere. So I'm happy to prolong that deadline, so we're doing that, but you can still jump on and cast it on. It is actually a quick knit. It's just big. And then there's the year-long knit-along of 2019, where we make 6 pairs of colorwork mittens for the duration of 2019. And yeah, more information about both in the group. They are basically all lasting to the end of the year, so before I get into any of the stuff that I have knitted, I want to point out the most amazing thing that I have here in the background. So I'm Norwegian, I've got a lot of relatives that knit. nothing particularly unusual about that, but I have one aunt, she's married to my mom's brother, and she knits so fast. She just knits, and she's knitted everything she could ever want to knit. So now she just knits anything just to knit. And she knitted a big blanket for pretty much every adult in my family. I'm still adult, but you know, that generation, my mum and her siblings and my grandparents, and everyone got a massive lace blanket, hand knitted each. And when mum asked me what I wanted for my birthday, I said I want a blanket like that too. And so my mum kind of got that as a commission from my aunt, and she was going to pay my aunt and stuff. My aunt was like, no, it's the next generation's turn now, so just making them for everyone. But I got the first one, and this is where I'm going to come across as an ungrateful, obnoxious little fill in the blank. My mum sent me the photo, and she was like, do you want me to bring the blanket now that me and your sister's going to visit you in London? Because they were here last week, and and they're back home now. It's fine. And she said, you know, I could bring it to you. And I'm like, do you like that color? Do you want to swap? Because all the work that my aunt had put into this blanket, this amazing large lace blanket, she'd chosen lilac. If you watched last episode, the one before that, I gave a long speech about how I feel about lilac. It wasn't a very positive one. Here I have this like amazing piece of knitting that someone gave to me, and you know, if there's one person who understands the work and love involved, it's me and other knitters. And I was like, it's lilac though, what I do. But mum was happy to have the lilac blanket. She likes lilac, go figure. So I got mom's blankets. This is actually a blanket that I have had the fortune of knowing for years, and now it is mine, and it's huge, and it's made in this like light wool yarn that's called Ullteppe garn by Gjestal, and it's no longer in production. So I think mom's blanket, the lilac one, is in a different yarn. It might actually have been in a yarn I like more than this, but you know what, this blanket, oh yeah, it's so big, and it's mine, and it's all like feather and fan all over. Just yes. I could wear this. I wonder if I could wear this it's like a weirdly shaped hat. I can do this. It's really hot and muggy today, so I need to like not maybe do this, but and then I'll tie it around myself like this. Oh yeah, I'll just be wearing a blanket now, just walking around London just like but yeah, I really had to show this off. It's just beautiful knitwear. I have huddled under this blanket a lot when I'm at my mum's, but it is now mine, and my mum has a new lilac blanket, so everyone's happy, it's all good. They're all the voice the same, it was just the colour. I'm just like, no, I can't do lilac. Isn't it funny how much I just love purples, and then as soon as you go into lilac land, I'm like, nope, cannot. The other thing I wanted to say before getting into the stuff I have knitted this week and two, I'm actually recording this on Friday. It's really cheeky. I'm gonna have it out next week, so yeah. Anyway, I have a pattern to announce. I am going to be part of a book in Norway called Instastikkboka, which is a project by a group of people in Oslo, I think, who basically wanted to make a book with a lot of Instagram based Norwegian knitting designers, and asked me if I wanted to join along, and I'm like, I don't have time to do anything. Sure. So they wanted me to submit 4 designers, one of which is new. So the other 3 is gonna be the Farmor Mist, the Tudor stockings, and the Winterfjell hat. And they have actually knitted up samples themselves. I have barely been involved in this book. I'm like, damn, cool. But there was one piece that I designed exclusively for the book, and I think they will have like the rights for a year or so. It's gonna be quite a while. And it's a cow, and I forgot the name. I don't remember what I called the cow. But it's here. I'm not sure which way is up, to be honest. I hadn't really thought about that. I believe I knitted in this direction, so let's just go with that. It is an old chart from the Sandby region. I love this one. Very commonly found at the palm of mittens, like really finely knit mittens. This gauge isn't as brutal, but yeah. So it's a cowl, just kind of, you know, wear it casually like that. You can knit it longer, it's just knit bottom up, and I'm even going to put in a bit of an instruction in how much one repeat will add in terms of measurements to the cowl. So you could do it like, you know, double around as well if you kind of just do very, very simple addition maths. So yeah, that's the cowl. It will come out in that book, which is going to come out at the end of this month, I believe, or maybe September. I should know this stuff. I'll put it down here if I'm wrong. Sorry. And yeah, just I'm really pleased with this. I knitted this out of Usk by Hillesvåg, which is one of my absolute favorite yarns. It's perfect for color work. I mean, if you want to have a close-up, you can see this is just perfect yarn for color work, honestly. It's of sport weight, I'd say. I think most would probably classify as fingering weight because that's how it's used, but in terms of actual weight, I will give it sport weight. So yeah, coming cowl pattern. I did forget to say that I am also going to link to the summer collection in the description down below in case anyone didn't get that and get to see that on Ravelry last week, in case you weren't watching that episode, because it was really long. And this episode might be quite long as well because I have a guest. There will be a guest. We recorded this last night, like yesterday, and I'm gonna edit that all together after doing this. Stuff you didn't need to know. Stuff you didn't need to know. I have finished two garments, one of which was not even cast on last time we talked. It's a quick one, but I'm going to talk about the not so quick one first, because that was quick too, which you wouldn't think because it was a fingering weight top, and I think I used a 3.5mm needle and it's done. I worked on this mostly when I was in Bergen for those 3 days that I was there, and then I just powered through the stockinette whilst I was back in London, and it's done. I should have worn this today, but I'm actually planning on running out very soon. I just had to kind of make time for this, and so I'm not actually wearing this, but bear with me. It's beautiful. So I'd done the lace, I think, last time I recorded. Now I've got the whole body done. It's got a bit of lace, like kind of corresponding lace at the bottom here as well. This thing is so beautiful. Where do I begin? Okay, the yarn. This is Kalinka linen that I bought from Wild and Woolly in Clapton, London, which is probably my favorite yarn shop in London. And there's a good competition here, okay? There's a lot of good options, and it's still like a fabulous shop, and I want all the yarn in there all the time. So I used a burgundy color, of course, and there's a lot of lace, but I found the lace to be really, really simple, which surprised me because it really doesn't look like it would be in kind of my lace judgment eyes. I knitted most of the lace whilst having a conversation with Birgit Berge when I was in Bergen. That's a lot of B's. You'd think I'd made a lot of mistakes. I actually didn't. I'm surprised too. So that's, yeah, done, and it blocked up really nicely. I wasn't sure about how to block linen. I've never worked with pure linen before, but I just laid it in water and pressed out the water and laid it flat to dry as any other knitting thing I had. I've worked with it in the same technique and method as other knitting that I do. I haven't really found this to be all that different. I was really intimidated by linen because I heard so many things like, oh yeah, the thing with linen is you have to work it flat because it gets biased, or yeah, linen is so hard to work with and it will cut through your skin and it'll be so hard, and it'll be... And I'm like, I haven't found any of those things to be true. It was as knitting with any other yarn. Should add that I don't mind knitting with cotton either. I know other people really hate that, so it really wasn't a big issue for me. And the yarn softened up so much just by winding it into balls and then knitting with it, and I could feel just how much softer this bit was now that I was down here, and then I was down at the edge. I can feel how much softer this is, and it's still the case. Like, it's rougher at the bottom edge than it is further up, just from literally just having it on here while working here and just it being worked a bit. So it's like leather. it gets softer and softer and more kind of ooey. So I really enjoyed it. It wasn't anything that I did differently with this. You can work it in the round. I worked in the round. Who said you can't do linen in the round? I don't get why there are all these like weird myths that I've come across with knitting with linen. I will say I haven't actually measured my gauge, but it does fit really well, so I assume I got a gauge. I worked a quarter needle size less than what I would have done had I been making this in a wool, because I figured there would be no springiness to linen, so I used a 3.5 needle instead of 375, which would have been my chosen needle. I think Leanna Testi, who's the designer of this beautiful top, used like a 3, so people have different tensions, and it seemed to be the right call, so I am very happy with it. Look at that fabric, seriously, 100% linen, and this is just, oh, and when you get the skein, it looks like a skein of straws, you know, like plants. It's crunchy, and now it's like flowy and shiny. So I'm not sure if we're gonna have any more really hot days in London, but never say never, because London always surprises you. So I might get used for this. I should probably weave in the ends. So yeah, this is Regnskog. It was included in the blue issue of Bladet Garn. I think that was the summer issue of last year. But Lena actually has a bunch of patterns in the sort of same formula with different lace patterns. There's a beautiful one that's like flowers at the top and otherwise looks sort of similar. Love to make that as well. I'm not 100% sure about whether they are available in English. You're gonna have to check Ravelry to find out, but if they aren't, perhaps you could ask her kindly to consider translating. That might be a possibility, I don't know. But I really love doing this, and I wonder if this was one of the last issues that, no, I think it was definitely translated into English if you buy a Ravelry download of this magazine. So if memory serves me right, it should be available. And yeah, I didn't really follow the pattern under here. I just knitted until I was 4 centimeters short of the length that I found suitable when trying this on, joining in the needles, the cables, so I could, you know, wear it whilst it was on the needles. I didn't do any of the shaping. The pattern actually has 2 instructions for shaping, and I didn't do either. But that's an option too. So the pattern does say, you know, you can not shape and you can knit to 4 centimeters short of desired length. So I guess I did follow the pattern. I just didn't choose any of the shaping instructions. In hindsight, maybe I should have, because it's a little bit baggy at the back, but that's kind of what I wanted, because honestly, as much as shaping is really flattering, and I could benefit from that because I have very different measurements from bust, waist and hips, I don't care when it's hot. When it's hot, I just want to cool down and not have anything that's clingy. So this really just, yeah, ticks that box off big time. It's so soft up at the yoke, I can't believe it. Like, it's quite hard down here still. That will soften up pretty soon, I'm sure, but up here it's like, and it's so like pretty, like it's so adorable. I can't, like, it's not, I don't know, I wear band t-shirts and stuff. Like right now I'm actually wearing a pretty cutesy vintage blouse cardi from Collective. It's not knitted, but it's black, right? I'm always like being like some kind of edge to it, and this is just like super pretty. So anyway, we have a lot to get through today, so I'm gonna put this away, but I will say that I highly recommend the pattern. I really enjoyed it. It's good, and very pleased to have kind of gotten over the linen anxiety hump, and I feel that I really want to knit more linen tops. This was very pleasant to knit. I enjoyed how easy the stitches just flowed, words, and yeah, if I dropped stitches, that was really easy to deal with as well. Overall, just a very pleasant experience, and I never thought I would be a summer top linen knitter, but consider me converted. Oh, so what about the other garment that I finished that wasn't even started last time? So I've been drooling over this particular collection the whole summer, and I finally took the plunge and bought it a couple of days, a week ago or so, and it's the Linen Noir collection by Quince & Co. And you guys know I love Quince & Co, and this pattern collection is great. I'm not sure if I'm going to make all of them, but at least I have my eyes on 2 or 3 of them. And now I made one of those. So it's the I don't know how to pronounce things. I'll put it here. And it's by Layla Robb. I believe she has 2 patterns in the collection. I would quite like to make the other one as well. So it's done. Okay, it's done. And I used the Sunless Lina yarn that I bought in Bergen. So that's already out of the stash. And I may not have woven in the ends yet. I'm going to talk about the ends. I might just talk about them right away, because this yarn is possibly a little bit lighter than the yarn that they recommended. They recommended the Kestrel, which is like an Aran weight, and this is, I don't feel like this is an Aran weight personally. Linen, this yarn Lina, which is the linen, viscose and cotton blend by Sunless. So it's quite a thin fabric, which I think it was supposed to be anyway, and I don't think I got gauge, so I believe it's got a 14 stitch gauge, and I chose the needle that I know will give me a 14 stitch gauge, but they actually written a needle that was larger than that, and that to me is very strange, because I literally use as big a needle as possible before the stitches literally can't fit the needle anymore. That's how tight I knit. And so what I think that they have done is actually knit it to maybe a 12 stitch gauge, but the drape of the linen made it so that the row gauge had fewer numbers. Basically, I think it was like 19 rows, so it pulls down, right? So if you pull your knit fabric down, that might be a 14 stitch gauge now. If I pull it down, it might be 16, it might be 18, you see? But you get fewer rows per 10 centimeters or 4 inches now. So I wonder if that's what happened when it was measured. So it may be technically a 12 stitch gauge, and that's when the 19 row gauge makes sense. So it's possible that this should have actually been an even thinner fabric, but I quite like this. It's still got a lot of positive ease to it. It's one of those things that's kind of shapeless, so it doesn't actually matter so much if you're bang on gauge. So, you know, I didn't swatch. Do I ever swatch? No. No. But I still care about gauge. Go figure. So I haven't woven in the ends, like I said, and I actually had, and then I took it out, because when it's this loose, you can see when I weave in the ends, and it shows really, really well. So what I've actually done here is one place, I literally just tied a knot. It's just there, which works because this is not going to hang any longer, so you can't see it from the outside, but it does look a bit funny when it's a bit further down, like this one. So yeah, if you know any way of weaving in ends that doesn't look as visible, because I do the one where you literally follow the strands of the knitted yarn, so it's kind of like a double held yarn that's in places. It usually works out really well. At this time, not so much. Yeah, happy to hear other techniques of weaving in ends. That's cool. But other than that, I do absolutely love this. I've already worn it quite a bit. It's good for like those warm days where having something on your sleeves isn't intolerable still. And the sleeves kind of reach me down to about maybe here, a bit here, depending kind of how I wear it. It's a drop sleeve obviously, and it drops almost down to here. I love it. It looks really nice. It looks nice when I have it up over my camisoles or over this sort of sleeveless casual dress with pockets that I have, which is sort of similar to what it was styled with in the pattern as well. I did the second smallest size because all the sizes are very big and meant to have a lot of ease, and I figured that's actually enough ease for me. I'm pretty happy with that. So yeah, I did have to put in an extra repeat of this pattern because I was off in row gauge, because I hadn't that effect of where it draped so much that I got different gauge and all that stuff that I just explained. So that was fine. It doesn't take very long still. So anyway, it is done. I kind of wish I was wearing it now, but I will be wearing it in the bonus part of the episode where we have a guest. So you'll be seeing it kind of how it hangs and drapes then. But yeah, it's just like big drapey sort of thing. And yeah, really like it. This yarn is awesome. I want to knit with it a lot more, but the color palette is really not my thing. There are very few colors of this yarn that speak to me, which is a bummer. So it's like small encouragement to Sunness to expand the color palette on that. Just because it's a summer yarn doesn't have to mean that it's got to be those like pastel colors. But there are some more colors that I do like. It's got a really nice yellow and greys, and yeah, I'm sure I could think of other excuses to knit with this yarn. So, yeah. And it's so nice. So nice. I heard people talk about linen a lot, and I was just like, I don't care. It's a linen blend. I don't like linen. It feels like straws. Don't like it. And I'm like, this is so soft. This is already soft from the get-go, as opposed to a lot of other linen yarns. So, ha. Did I modify this other than the extra repeat? Yes, I modified the construction. So I knitted down the front to the other underarm, which was a bit difficult to find out because the pattern doesn't really tell you where to stop. It just says to knit the whole front and the whole back, and then you seam it all together. So I just knitted to what I figured would be the underarm, and according to the pattern it should be the number of rows that is equal to the number of stitches you pick up for the sleeve. And I will politely disagree with that, and I think maybe this is again because they had more of a drapey fabric than me. The general rule, and it's not like a big rule, but the general rule is that you pick up stitches 2 stitches per 3 rows. Some people do 3 per 4 rows, and there's other things, but generally that's usually what you do. So I made sure that I had added about, I think, 11 rows, so that had 30 something instead of 20. I think I was told to have 23 rows to pick up 23 stitches, and instead I did 34 rows, so I could kind of have 11 rows to skip, which sort of, yeah, added up, and it looks quite nice. I'm really pleased with that. So once I'd done that, I did the same for the back, and the back was just plain stockinette, which I don't really like doing flat, but it was only for these 34 rows. So then I was here and I joined it in the round because I am not working this damn thing flat. I did incorporate a purl column so that it kind of looks seamed, and I could also seam that purl column shut entirely so it gets that structure, but I don't really find that I need that. It's got so much ease, and it's already not a very structured garment, so it does have that kind of stockinette column on the inside here. And the good thing is that the pattern tells you how long your piece should be once you have done the given, I think, 5 repeats of the pattern, and so that's when I knew that I needed a 6th repeat. And then I did the bottom edging, which I did a bit of short rows on that to avoid doing that in the round, but I didn't want to seam because I did it flat and stuff like that. Basically, I don't want to purl the garter, is what I'm trying to say. So I did that, and yeah, really easy to modify. There's one thing I have left out, and that is actually that you're supposed to pick up for the neckline and immediately bind those stitches off. I did that and it did not look good, and it could be because of how I already modified this. But instead of now having this one really neat edge here and here, it just became 2 edges, but one for the pickup that I was bound off and one for the cast on edge. So that didn't really make sense to me. I'm sure other people have had more success with that, probably using the right yarn and not my modifications, but yeah, I just left it out, and it's nice without it. So yeah, cool. So that's all I have to say about Deschamps. Oh, that's not that. Whoa, yeah, love it. I love how, like, it's sort of like a feather and fan. It's different. There's more stockinette involved here, but yeah, it's great. So 2 garments, 2 summer garments. I have like a considerable number of summer garments now. It's like, hang on, let's do a count. So I got the Sordvik, I've got my Brennskog, I've got, oh, we've got Tarmac and a Maltz I haven't talked about today, this one, and I've got Solea. Was that 5? Can't count. That's like a wardrobe of summer tops. But I'm not done. I'm not done. I've got more summer tops in the works. Let's just get to that. Just, yeah. So because I enjoy the process of the Brennskog, the burgundy linen tops so much, I thought I'll do another one of Lena Testi's yoke tops, and there was one of them that recommends the yarn that I used for the Solvik top, so there's one. And I used only half the yarn that I'd purchased of Rowan Creative Linen, and I found that I probably have just enough to do that top of Lena Testi, so I did that. What I have done, I have modified quite a bit on this one because now I'm more comfortable with the whole method, and so I'm knitting a smaller size with a looser gauge. So I'm knitting size medium, but I'm using 5mm needles, and yeah, I would probably normally have used 4 to 4.5s for the size that would have been mine. But I'm just like, I'm gonna wear this in the summer. I don't want this yarn that I find to be quite thick to be also really dense. Each to their own, but that was something I just reasoned, and I'd like for this to be a quick one because it's kind of like a cheeky just leftover yarn project I'm just gonna get out of the way. So I got the yoke done today. It's fairly quick knit, quite simple. I got through a lot of Queer Eye while knitting this. It's gonna look even greater when it's blocked, and this yarn is so forgiving as well. So I have just bound off for the sleeves, which is done whilst you work in the round. So you just do the garter and you never have to go back to the sleeves and do any edging. It's done. So I'm just going to work down the body and then it will be done. And I may put on a little bit of shaping here because I'm still a bit worried that I don't have enough yarn. That was also part of the reasoning why I went for a looser gauge and a smaller size, because there will be fewer stitches, and I'm reasoning that that means I will also be needing less yarn. Because if you think about it, tighter gauge garments tend to recommend more yarn, more meterage, so I thought go into a bigger size and looser, so I should have enough. And you know, I just bind off when I'm out of yarn and it will be cropped, and you know what, I like cropped, so it's all good. Even this cardigan from the shop is cropped, so yeah, stuff you needed to know. So it works with my wardrobe, which is always worth thinking about, because when you spend so much time making something, you want to make sure it fits, you know, with all the skirts and the shorts and the so yeah, this top is called Bladlilja, which means leaf lily, I believe. And just, yeah, should be done in a jiffy. I'm sure it's done next time. But although every time I say that, I never am done. So, oh well. I do have one, arguably two more projects I'm going to talk about rather briefly. So, I cast this on quite a while ago, and it's taken me a long time because this is not as simple as you'd think, and I knew that, and that's why I wanted to do it. It's another Åsa Tricotsa garment, and yeah, I know I have like 2 of her garments on the needles that I haven't finished, and now I'm doing a 3rd one. Whatever. What is this? So it's a tank top. It's a pretty simple one. I do have a printout here because I have infinite ink for years. I'm like, print everything now. So let's see if I can show you this photo. This is what it's gonna look like, right? Should be pretty straightforward. Now, Åsa is pretty much as little of a fan of weaving in ends as I am, so her entire project is to have as few ends as possible, to see how much you can just like zig and zag in one go, as she says, I think. So the cast on is a provisional one, and it starts right here. And then you decrease for the curve of the neckline, and you work yourself up to the shoulder. Yeah. And then you cast on from shoulder all the way up here. Not from here, from here. We'll get back to that. And then you go all the way back here and work short rows back and forth down. And then you go back. And that's when you knit together the cast on stitches here with the stitches that you had worked up to here, so that you get a seam. Yes, because I'm sure that will happen on the other side when you start picking up here and stuff later. And you then work the short rows at the back as well. So that's what I've got here. Right, so this is, I'm sorry I've been explaining this to you mirrored. So I'm working up here. Now I got this length here, which goes kind of behind, and I worked on these short rows, which is like the back of the shoulder cap, so it will sit like that. And I've done that for the other side as well. So what I will be doing now is work down the length of the back, right? So that's parallel to here. And once I'm at the underarm, I think what I'm gonna do then, if I understood the pattern, I haven't read too much ahead, is cast them provisionally for the front and work my way up again, and then work up this strap and bind off here, and then return back and knit the rest down. And that's it. And it's so cool. This construction method, this is the kind of thing that gets me really excited in knitting. It's just this kind of innovative thinking in knitting that I am all about this. I'm just like, oh, yeah. You tell I'm excited. So that's an Åsa Tricosa ziggurat tank. The ziggurat tanks are a little bit different than the ziggurat sweaters and cardigans, just because they don't have sleeves, so you have to do slightly different things, which is why this whole thing is going on. I'm using Sumner's Tin Lina, that is the thinner version of Lina that I've just talked about. Also a cotton viscose linen blend, already really soft. It's a beautiful dark shiny grey. It's got like a little bit of variation here because the different fibers I've taken to the dye slightly differently. So it'll be a great little grey top, and it lives in my antler and acorn bag because I use that bag a lot. So also, this is in Bags by Awesome Granny, which we're gonna do a giveaway for now. Just remembered, this is not well planned. So I'm gonna open a thread in my Ravelry group for winning this bag. Obviously not this exact bag because this is the bag that I am using, but I have an identical one donated by Bags by Awesome Granny. And yeah, it's to celebrate the fact that this podcast has reached 15,000 subscribers. And I will be doing that on Ravelry simply because it's the only place where I can effectively do a random number generator draw of a winner. So that's the only option, basically. I don't have any other way. So I will open a Ravelry thread. There will be some rules in the first post, so make sure you read that, and then you can be in the draw of winning a bag by Awesome Granny. So yeah, thank you all so much for subscribing. I'm always like really excited when people donate something to my podcast, and then I can give that back to one of you guys, and so yeah, return a favor, because you guys are giving me a lot to be able to do this whole thing. So thank you for sticking with me. I have a lot of things that I really want to do with the podcast, but as you all know, it's like a little bit on hold, kind of. Not on hold, I'm still doing it, but nothing's changing or developing with it because of the whole PhD situation. Anyway, so once that's done, I hope to be able to take it in different directions, obviously keeping the podcast format going the way it is because I quite like that. So I want to just thank you all for your patience and just all the love that I get from doing all this, because it's been sorely needed at times. You guys have been with me through ups and downs, and whilst I don't necessarily share the details, I don't know where I would be without this podcast. It's kept me sane and given me joy where there was lacking in other areas of my life, and it's just like, oh, I was not gonna get emotional today. It's too early in the day. I can't, no. And I've been watching so much Queer Eye lately, and I don't know if you watched the new Queer Eye, but it's very, very different from the old Queer Eye, and I'm literally just crying because of every other episode. So already a bit, maybe possibly emotional state, but yeah, so there's a lot of tangents. You can tell I was not planning on recording today. I never record on a Friday, but I am gonna spend the day out with knitters. I thought I might just warm up, you know, just get ready. So what is left for this episode is the little bonus content where Anushka is guesting, because I have been good and I have not been buying anything. I feel pretty proud about that, hoping that will keep up, even though I'm going into Richmond today where the yarn shop tribe is. So, you know, wish me luck, and thank you all so much for watching, and just cue Anushka sitting next to me here yesterday. Enjoy. So hi, welcome to the kind of bonus part of this episode, which I actually have not recorded yet, so it's gonna come after I make the, you don't need to know that, but yes, I'm doing the, what I guess is my biannual podcast guest, given that it's been exactly 2 years since I had a guest on the show. So yeah, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi! My name is Anushka. I also have a YouTube podcast for knitting and craft called the Crimson Stitchery, which was Ellie's fault. So Ellie and I have known each other for quite a few years now, and we met at a knitting group originally in Weldon Willie.
I think we met very shortly after I started this podcast. Like I started it like, I think September 2016. And I know it was still 2016 when we first met. Or arguably maybe the beginning of 2017.
Maybe,
something along those lines. I was still a bit of a Skeindeer baby. So,
and then like we met at the knitting group, and then another day of the week I was at home on YouTube, and I was like, oh, it's that girl.
Is that how you found me? Because I remember you were in my comment section. I was just like, it's that person from the knit night, because I had met 2 people that knit night, and I was like, one of them's called Anushka.
Well, there's only one Anushka.
That helped me figure it out.
I was like, literally just popped up, and I was like, wow, she knows where I live.
I'm in someone's algorithm. That's nice.
Literally, so sweet.
Yeah. So, apart from being a knitter, what do you
apart from being a knitter, I am also a PhD student. I'm currently in year 2 of 5 because I'm part-time.
And probably a good call, actually.
And that's kind of my main thing. I'm also a musician, and I have a previous life where I used to be a costume designer and maker, because I have my first degree was in theatre design, and that's what I did for nearly a decade.
So you know stuff about clothes. Which is convenient, because we make clothes so when it comes to knitting and stuff, we need to think about how we fit stuff and shape them to fit ourselves, and it's not necessarily given that a particular pattern's going to fit every sort of shape and proportion out there. Like, we're obviously hoping to have as many sizes as possible, but that doesn't mean that everyone has the same sort of proportion. So often I usually recommend, like most knitters, to learn the skills to adapt to themselves.
It's a good skill to have. I find it really odd, to be honest with you, because my training was in theatre, and when you're making in theatre, everything is completely bespoke, whether it's a costume that's being made for an actor or it's a set that's being made for a production. There isn't this sense of standardization that exists when you study fashion, when you pass and cut for fashion. Like, you don't really use standard sizes. Like, when you draft as a theatre maker, you know, you start with a basic block, and then the first thing you do is sew a toile and fit it to a body, and it immediately deviates from the standard block. And there's this also, it's completely accepted that standard blocks are blocks, and that they're a starting point, and that they're a tool. They're not meant to be, you know, necessarily representative of people's body. It's just a starting point that you then go from, and like, not a single person ever fits in a standard size.
Never. I think that's an excellent point.
No matter how small or big or what shape you are, how short or tall you are, no one ever fits perfectly into a standard size.
I think that's an excellent thing to remember, because like, I think often, and I used to be a bit like that as a novice knitter, which I guess maybe I'm not anymore, but I used to be very much sort of negative of a pattern that didn't fit me well. And now I'm just like, well, that pattern will have fit someone well, it just didn't fit me well. It doesn't actually say anything bad about neither myself nor the pattern.
Right.
And I just didn't adapt.
But I think also we're quite spoilt in a way, because knitted fabric is so forgiving. It stretches, and you can get away with a lot of stuff in a way that like woven fabric doesn't. And I think that attribute of knitted fabric is used to people's advantage / disadvantage in different ways, and in some ways it makes us a little bit lazy, I would go as far to say, about fit. Like, so many patterns don't have any waist shaping from the bust to the hip. It's like, very few people have got the same bust and hip measurement, and what about that thing in the middle, you know, your waist? And then another thing that I think is interesting is to think about negative ease. As well. But
that's, I think, one of those advantages of knit fabric, because I used to think, I don't want negative ease, I don't want something to be too tight, to be like less than my measurements. But actually knit fabric, that's like one of those things that it allows. Like, I can make, I don't know, if I found a pattern somewhere of a no ease garment, and then I find that it's like 1/2 inch less than my bust measurement, actually don't need to modify that at all. Like that's one bit of like negative ease that's going to be very trivial in the end. Like it's going to fit really nicely usually.
Yeah, and actually it could be to your advantage. Like it could look really nice to have that, because that little negative ease,
curl a bit around there and be a bit flowy down here.
But if you think half an inch, by the time it's spread around the whole circumference of your bust, it's hardly anything at all.
Yeah.
And so in certain aspects, like you want to have a bit of negative ease in places where you want it to hug your body and kind of hold it in, and you don't need a great deal of movement in your, you know, upper chest, but then you don't want like tons and tons of negative ease in your wrist, because it's going to cut your circulation off. And definitely not on your neck.
But also know like you have a lots of opinions about like shoulder fit, which I've taken a lot from, because I think that's like, you can mess up a lot with a knitted garment, and in a way like you could just say it's a design feature and it's all fine, and then it could, you have a lot of kind of freedom, but if it doesn't sit well on the shoulders.
Yeah, the shoulders are the hardest part to fit of the whole garment, definitely. Yeah, we've had so many chats about shoulder fit. Like there was this one period where I was like being really critical, and I had a critical eye. Yeah. Because when you spend, you know, years of your life training to do something, you can just see it. And I was like, look at that pattern, the shoulder's in the wrong place, the shoulder's in the wrong place, the shoulder's in the wrong place. And it happens so much, and it's because of the lack of information, which is changing greatly, about body measurements in knitting patterns. Because, you know, before you were lucky if you got bust, waist and hip, but you probably didn't get centre front to waist, for instance, you know, nape to waist, or back nape to waist, which are different because it's it, you know, and like the fact that your neck sits lower at the front than it is at the back, and that whole thing. A lot of change with the introduction of short rows in modern knitting patterns. I think that's helped. Definitely.
And just like more raglan sweaters are now worked flat before you join the round, so you get the bit heightened here. I think that helps. Yeah,
because the back of your neck is so much higher than the front of your neck. You just need to hold up a shirt or even a t-shirt, and you can see the vast difference, you know, with a crew neck t-shirt, let alone a collared shirt or blouse. Yeah. But it's just like, it just requires a much greater understanding of anatomy, basically, and how the body works. Like so many times you see a shoulder seam sitting out here.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
That bit, there's no joint there. Like that's the side of my arm. And my like, shoulder joint is all the way in here, because when you move your arm, that's the bit, that's the arm socket. Yeah. So that's where the seam needs to be, because it's about, you know, one plane going into another plane.
Yeah. But it's also really like, I find the biggest kind of disasters there, not that I'm going to assume to be the expert because I'm not, but is often in the larger sizes, because people tend to grade proportionally. So they're like, okay, we need a bigger bust, bigger everything, bigger neck opening, bigger shoulders, and it's like, whilst your bust and belly and stuff reflect your size in terms of, you know, the bit of chub and extra and stuff, shoulders are mainly just representing your skeleton. Like if you feel here, you're probably gonna be kind of hard here, right? You can hear the sound, I don't know if you can.
Solid as wood.
Right, or bone. And that means that that's probably the same across sizes to some extent. Obviously the kind of chub starts here, so.
Well, again, it's jargon. It's anatomy, isn't it? Yeah. Technical word, chub.
So I think that's something I'm seeing more and more designers taking into account now, and not going all the way with the shoulder, so that someone who has a larger bust doesn't have to deal with a shoulder seam that sits down here when it's not supposed to. I realize the irony, I'm wearing a drop sleeve shoulder now. That is a different design format that's supposed to drop. What we're talking about now is set-in sleeve designs, which the shoulder seam's full.
Yeah, but you can see like that's you can see the crease there. Yes. So that's where your shoulder socket is.
Yes.
You know. But also, it's to do with anatomy, because you're quite right. Like the basic skeleton is, you know, it fluctuates within a limited degree, and it's everything that goes on top. But also the fact that when you pattern cut for different size groups, the basic blocks are different. You don't use the same basic block, so you certainly don't, you know, take the corner and drag it out, you know, on the pixel that you do on Photoshop or whatever. It's not how it works.
I think I'm moving away from that. I'm quite happy to see that. I am less coming across patterns where things are graded proportionally, where someone with a larger bust is going to have to deal with a wider neckline. And it's very cool to see that there's actually independent designers who are actually moving ahead with this, and kind of the big commercial companies or maybe making patterns to sell the yarn are lagging a bit behind here. I'm finding that anyway. You may have a different experience because you work with different commercial companies than me.
Yeah, I do have a very different experience from you, and we've come to the craft from, you know, through different routes, let's say. But I agree with you. It's good that more designers are learning about grading and about sizing, and that size ranges are beginning to expand at last. You know, it's fantastic. But what I wonder is that I think that the empowerment needs to go to the individual knitter, you know? I think it's down to the individual knitter to learn how to measure their body realistically. And like, let's be honest, measuring your body is a really fraught experience. If the measurements fluctuate through the day, let alone through the years, you know, like I have a number, a number in my head that the tape measure doesn't always meet. And it can be really alarming. It's so caught up in our personal identity, especially as women, and that's what most knitters are. But I just think it is great with the extended size range, but also the individual knitter needs to have the responsibility to heighten her education about size and fit, and about adapting knitting, because, you know, even with all of the information in the knitting pattern, it's still up to you to make sure that you've got the ability to change it for your own body. You know?
So I have two thoughts on this.
Okay.
They're kind of conflicting, but I think they can coexist. And it's kind of like, one thing is this idea that, well, some people are made to modify more than others, and some of it is just the nature of how the larger your body, the more there's degree of freedom to where your bits can be allocated, whereas the smaller you are, then you're going to be usually a bit more similar in proportions. And so already given that, I would like to see just most patterns having most sizes at least catered for, so at least you don't have to modify that on top of all those other proportionate issues that disproportionately is the case for larger people. And so I already want to see more size inclusivity. I guess that's the buzzword now, size inclusivity. But at the same time, I don't want to be dependent on, that's the other thought. I don't want to be dependent on people grading for me and only being the customer for people who have thought that, oh yeah, you know, I can get ahead with grading for larger sizes and be the size inclusive designer, and then that's how I'm gonna kind of make a living, which isn't like dodgy and like, I'll make money out of this, but I don't want to, as a person who's want to knit for my body, be kind of at the mercy of that. I want to actually go, okay, this one's only made for a 38-inch bust. I'm gonna do it anyway, and I will figure it out. You know, I want to have that skill set. And also, you know, you might not always knit the latest pattern. You might want to do vintage pattern. That's what I was thinking. I was thinking like those, they are hardly bigger than 32-inch busts most of the time, I find. Yeah, sometimes. But I find that sometimes you like only get 36 or 38. Like you only get there's like a one size fits all, and it's like, no. And I'm in the 40s for the records in inch for the bust, and nearly in the 50s like waist down. So, and I really like vintage patterns, and like those old like newspaper clippings where there's like one paragraph and it's a whole lace jumper, and I want to be able to do that for me. I can't like call back to the 1940s and be like, do you want to be more size inclusive? I'd like to see that. And it's like, well, you know. So I've got something to offer about this. So I am I'm a clothing expert because I'm doing my third degree in clothing. Both practical and theoretical, and there's this idea, right, that's very, very prevalent in society, that in the past people were so much smaller, like even in the recent past, and to a certain extent they were, but not in such an extreme way as people always think. Because, for example, if you go to the Victoria and Albert Museum, which has got a really large clothing collection, and you see on display the 18th century shoes, they're like a child's shoe, you know, they're like a size 3 or something crazy, really, really small for a so-called for an adult woman. But I have read different accounts about when you start to look into how certain shoes in collections were obtained, not necessarily the V&A, but you know, other collections, sometimes the shoes that were acquired into the collections were unsold stock. So there were shoes that no one bought, maybe because they were too small. That's interesting. You know, they weren't necessarily shoes that were worn really, really regular. Or even like something someone grew out of that they didn't fit for very long, so they weren't worn down and thrown away.
Yeah. Exactly, exactly, because you know, shoes do wear out, and like shoes used to be passed down, like, you know, the rich person, when they'd finished wearing their fancy silk shoes, they might give them to their favourite maid and so on and so forth. But also talking about what you were saying about the distribution of flesh on the body, it's not just in the larger sizes, because I have designed a show for acrobats who are like athletes, aerialists, and you know, the numbers on the page might look to a certain degree, but like a 36-inch bust for an aerialist, actually that was all back muscle. So that's something, so she didn't really have a bust, because it was all muscle on her back and shoulders, so you couldn't cut something with a bust, it wasn't suitable for her.
But I've been wondering about that, because I'm talking about like the ratio between the shoulder measurements and the bust of a larger person, but I've also found the converse to be the same for smaller sizes, that we often assume that someone with a very small bust will have very narrow shoulders. And I have actually heard from people who have very small busts that the garment didn't fit their shoulders. They were too broad shoulders relative to the bust for the grading of the pattern they were knitting.
Honestly, it's such a minefield. I don't know how people do it. I don't know how people do it. And
stretching knit fabric.
But in some ways that's kind of why, you know, I stopped knitting for a little while. And then I kind of later picked it up again. So I do write some knitting patterns, and I used to do it more. I used to do it much more, actually, when I was a teenager. So fun fact, I was a Ravelry beta tester.
You were.
I've been knitting for a long time. I've been on Ravelry for a long time.
You've been published like way back.
I was published like when Pom Pom was quite young, I think in issues 6 and 7. And I got to a certain point in writing knitting patterns, and I was like, this is a minefield, I don't understand sizing. My response was then to go and study it for 3 years, and then I felt so overwhelmed by everything, because I was like, how can you standardize this when people are not standard? And I've come through it now, and now I understand that you have to start somewhere. So you have to have standard sizing, and it's not the be all and end all, it's just a starting point. And I think that's why what I was saying about making sure that the individual knitter is empowered enough to educate herself and make her own decisions. And you don't have to see those numbers and feel freaked out. Actually, it can be really empowering to know that you don't have to do what the pattern is saying you're meant to do.
Yes, and that's kind of, I've obviously come from a slightly different angle, but I've sort of landed at the same place. Probably because we know each other, but also because of my experience. Is like, when I started designing, I'm just like, oh my god, I know nothing about sizing. What if someone can see that I haven't graded to a proper M, a proper S? I was like kind of neurotic about it. I was like really scared that I wasn't doing the proper sizing standards, and I even like had one tester just saying passing like, oh, I wasn't quite sure about the size because he didn't use like sizing standards, and I was like, oh, I've been found out. And it was like, I've had to shake that off and just go with, okay, these are the bust measurements I want to cater to. That seems to be like the kind of main factor that you start with, because that's the thing that will differ the most and be the broadest part of most people, though obviously people differ, shoulder, bust, belly, all that stuff.
Well, for an upper garment.
So I started there, and then as I had the kind of breadth of sizes I knew I wanted to design for, put that in my spreadsheet, and this is even before I started actually making the design. And
it's so organized.
I love a good spreadsheet. It literally kept me up until like 1 at night last night. Like to have the lights coming in, getting like reflection from the fancy building across the road that I would love to be able to afford. Anyway, so I then pick up some sizing standard spreadsheets that are around. You know, you got the Yarncraft Council, you got Isolda's kind of combination spreadsheet. There's lots of them out there, and I try to look there to see, okay, well, someone with that bust, how long should their arm side be roughly? How long should their, goodness, that's a long height. I look dead. So I'm just kind of, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I just started focusing on the numbers and the measurements. I'm not actually ever going to give anyone a shortcut and say SML, you know, like you're a small, you're medium, and so on. And I'm just gonna, because I had that my first experience as well. I was gonna knit my very first jumper, and I wanted to do the owl sweater by Kate Davies, and then I was like, never knitted a jumper before, never folded an English language pattern before, and I was like, first step, find my size, know how much yarn I need, and it's all numbers. size 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on. And I'm like, okay, so I need to measure my bust and my waist and my hip, and I was circling different parts of the pattern and found that my size is there in one aspect but the other size is there.
Yeah.
And it was all like, oh, okay, I'm gonna cast on one size larger than the one that my bust is, because that's what my hips are, my upper hips, and then I'm just gonna do another extra decrease round up to my waist.
Yeah.
So now I'm at the size that I need for my bust. And being a complete beginner here, like knowing nothing about garment making whatsoever and limited knitting knowledge, nailed it. Yeah, that was just because I was forced to look at the numbers,
yeah,
and not accept that this is a standard that I need to, you know, squeeze into. And also if it didn't fit, it wasn't the fault of neither my body nor the pattern. It was just that I had to puzzle the things together.
That's good.
Yeah, so I'm kind of trying to carry that with me now that I'm making patterns, and making sure that people don't take shortcuts and not just go, oh, well, I'm a medium, so I'm just gonna go straight there.
Yeah. Also, it's just weird, like, how can you be a medium person? Like, what's a medium person?
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything.
I'm almost a person, but not quite a person yet.
Yeah.
I'm just a medium person.
And like, it's different people in different parts of the world, so just like, it's so relative. And I often hear like reactions from people who are like, say, one person from the States getting a pattern from a person from Japan, and they're just like, and then like, both of these systems are technically valid respective to the regions that they're from, but it would help both if there were just pure numbers there. So, you know,
so I'm a small in UK, extra small in American sizing, and in Hong Kong I wear a large to extra large. And people are like, wow, so meaty. People are very, like, you know, forward in age. Like, there's not really the concept of personal space, not that we've got any now.
To fit into the frame.
It's just it's just ludicrous. And then when you go somewhere and like people are saying that stuff to you, either end of the extreme, it just feels so arbitrary, which is what it is. So Ellie and I hang out at quite a lot of knitting meetups together.
Yeah, you know, comparing them all, you gotta catch them all and see which ones.
And I remember, like, one of the first times that I met you, like one of the few times at the beginning, you were knitting like the most beautiful sock, black and white in the Norwegian motifs.
My stockings.
Yeah, and there was even one that you were knitting for your friend. You're like, oh, I'm just gonna give this away. I've never made a sock before, but I'm gonna make this incredibly complicated sock and just give it away as a gift. I was like,
that means we met before Christmas, because that was a Christmas present.
Yeah. Cool. I was like, you're a nice friend. You're giving those away.
Like, mental note, nice friend.
And it was really impressive. And I think one of the reasons that your podcast has been so interesting is because you've introduced things into the kind of internet knitting culture that are beyond like what the norm is at the moment. Like, all of your focus on the Norwegian products that were really exciting because they weren't available in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, like, I suddenly just discovered knitting podcasts. Like, I always wanted to find like knitting content on YouTube that was more than just tutorials. But when I did find them, I was really excited. But then everyone was like, just like, oh yeah, I've done this shawl and this like hand-dyed superwash merino yarn, and this next person like, oh yeah, and I've done these socks and this yarn is completely like stockinette sock. And it's like, I was really like, merino. Yeah, and I was in a way really intrigued by that because it was so different from what I was doing, but at the same time I was like, hang on, nobody is doing what I'm doing. Yeah, it wasn't any color work at the time. There was all superwash and hand-dyed yarn. It was a high price point. And I'm like all about hand-dyed superwash yarn now, and I like to support independent dyers, and I really appreciate both the colors and the fabric for, you know, the right, you know, temperature and climate and all that. But I was like, nonetheless, feeling like I, as a knitter, wasn't that represented in terms of my, I guess, interests and approach and budget. So I thought, well, I'm pretty confident about my knitting. I'm not confident about a lot of things, myself and like stuff in life, but knitting, pretty confident knitter. So I thought, yeah, I'm just gonna do that, you know, let's just put my little camera in like the little window here and just like sit and talk. And then I was like, yeah, okay, let's take this like up a step. You know, I got the tripod and I got the like setup, and it's like, it got, you know, ahead. I got noticed by people, and it seems to a lot of people, I'm not going to credit just my podcast for that, but we've seen there's been a big move towards affordable yarns, to non-superwash, to garments.
But I think just variety.
Yes.
And also looking in different areas for your knitting project, and not necessarily just picking the thing that's trending, because, you know, we're lucky because we've got so much, like, I'm going to say the D word, diversity in all of the knitting groups that we attend, in terms of, like, not just in terms of things like, you know, profession and ethnicity, or you know, financial background, but also in taste.
Yeah,
you know?
and in knitting, and like this is why I love especially the independent knitting meetups. Like, you will find anyone from, like, anything from acrylic yarns and garter to fancy pants lace and superwash and luxury yarns and silk and cashmere, like, in everything, and we're all knitting together.
Or people that only knit, you know, 100% acrylic baby yarn for their grandparents, or the people that only knit hand-dyed yarn dyed with plants that they found in the marshes, you know. It's like all of them that you can imagine, and it's really fun. And I think that kind of varied approach has been really nicely reflected in your podcast. And like, it's not about, you know, oh, I'm never gonna knit a superwash merino scarf or whatever, but it's just about saying, like, there are lots of things that we can all do and enjoy together, actually, and like being inclusive in that way. And I just want to see more in different knitting. I mean, I throw myself in the bandwagons quite a bit as well, but I'm also like, let's not all just do the same. Like, knitting can be so many different things, and it's kind of ridiculous when everyone's doing the same, you know. But I understand, like, sometimes things are popular for a reason. So I'm not, it can be fun. Like, I love a good knit along. You guys know that. The kind of major thing I'm gonna kind of give myself a little bit of credit for is to kind of give permission, in a way, just with this platform, to enjoy affordable yarns and the benefits of it, and the fact that you can build up your stash a lot with that because you can afford it. No, I'm kidding. It's not like a goal to have a big stash, but I'm not, like, obviously anti big stash either. But yeah, I think, like, there was a little bit of a collective shame in cheaper yarns and commercial yarns. And then I just come in and say, I've done this whole sweater and it cost like £4. And I'm not apologising for it. And I used to have that. I used to write a blog when people still did that. And at the end of the blog I would write how much my project cost me. But I kind of did this, in my head it was a parody of what sewing bloggers did, where they're like, oh, the latest, this fabric that was this printed by this person that I bought from this shop, and I'd be like, you know, fabric found at the bottom of a cupboard, £0. Thread leftover, £0. Bought 2 buttons, 20p. You know, something zip, £1. Cost a project, £1.20.
Oh my god, this reminds me of this parody blog that I used to have at that time. Actually, it was back in like 2009, and we used to like do a parody fashion blog, but we got all the clothes at like far remote Norwegian kind of second-hand shops.
Nice.
And they were really ridiculous, but a lot of it was like actually really nice knitted cardigans. But at the time we were kind of like all cardigans, and now I'm just like,
ooh, cardigans.
Hey, let's look at those photos again. Oh, that's Burberry, no, that's let this stuff. But at the time we were just like making fun, but fun, just fact, trivial bits.
What we always agreed on was the fact that if you're knitting something and you're wearing it, that's really cool. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, to have done that, to have made something, you know, with your 2 hands or with help from your knitting group, you're like, it's really, really cool. The fact that it's really cheap or expensive, it's kind of superfluous, you know. And it's also really individual. Like, to one person, you know, dropping 200 quid on yarn for a sweater is not a big deal, and to other people it's like their monthly income. Yeah,
for sure. And also, like, the idea that yarn isn't necessarily better just because it costs more. Yarn isn't necessarily worse because it costs less. I'm saying this now, I'm looking at my shelf of Holst combs. I'm not sure how many you're counting here. I think we're at 15. They're mostly whole super soft, JC Rennie. There's some Hillesvåg there. They all cost me between 15 and 30 pounds, and there are about half a kilo to a kilo each of very light fingering weight yarn.
But that's one thing that your podcast has been so great for, like educating people about how to judge the quality of fibre and not just being swayed by all of the marketing.
Which is weird because I'm not an expert. I know very little compared to people who actually work with wool. But I know stuff. Work with wool. Well, yeah, I guess. But
you're a knitting professional.
We'll make it. But I'm like, I've just made stuff and I've seen how they hold that up. I'm not going to say the horse is like super strong because it's not. It's quite a weak yarn, but it's highly affordable. You get a lot of meters for the money, and the strength just depends on the gauge and like a good gauge.
But like cashmere is so luxurious, not affordable. It's also a weak yarn. Yeah, because it's so fine.
Disintegrates.
It doesn't hold up very well. Yeah. So
yeah, I think that's I think lots of people are now recognizing that there's a difference between. Or maybe just like a lack of relationship between price and quality to some extent. So
what I always found quite puzzling was like how many people knit yarns out of 100% superwash merino.
Yeah.
Because I did a pair of socks out of 100% superwash merino. I wore them once in a pair of shoes and there were holes.
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of factors involved in this. Like, I know some people have a lot of success with it, but then it turns out they have used yarn that had a lot of plies with a high twist, and they knit them really like bulletproof tight.
But also, like, what were your shoes like?
Yeah.
You know, what shoes were you wearing? What is your tread like?
Yeah, I was gonna say that because all my wear is at the tip of my toes. But other people, I get them at the heel, some to get them quite evenly. Yeah. At the back of the heels even. And
I get it at the top. If I'm wearing a pair of brogues, the top of the brogue rubs away at the sock because it's very hard. But you know, if you wear boots, then that's not going to be so much of an issue for you. Or like, I don't know, open-toed shoes or something. Yeah.
But I definitely think there's something to be said for thinking about your choice of fibre in terms of what you're going to make it for, how you're going to use it, and assuming you want it to last given how long you spent on making it. And I do sometimes, and it's like none of my business to judge, but I do often see people make garments out of yarn and I'm like, that's not going to last very long. Like, there will be store-bought sweaters that will last longer than that sweater you just made.
Oh, like when the gauge is really open.
Yeah, like there's a lot of patterns nowadays for like single ply superwash merino with a very loose gauge that I would do DK weight yarns with.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and it's like, it's cool, everyone does their own thing, and if there's like one takeaway message from this podcast, it's like people just, you know, you do you.
You do you. Not here to judge. We have a lot of opinions.
We have opinions.
But we have opinions about our own stuff. Like,
oh god.
We're not gonna...
Oh yeah, we have a lot of discussions. It's just like opinions gets what the other person does, and we're just gonna go,
Yeah, like we disagree with each other about a lot of stuff, and that doesn't mean that we can't be friends.
Yeah. Oh, this is not even going to be about knitting now. I've just been thinking about that a lot the past few months, up until a year even, that there are like some people who feel like friendships depend on agreeing. And I often find like when I'm feeling like, okay, we got a, you know, good friendship going and I can express my mind to someone and my opinions, and it doesn't matter that they're not the same, and then I find like in the other person they kind of go weird, and then I'm just realizing we're not friends anymore. I'm just like, that's odd. So yeah, I think that's an interesting part. It's got nothing to do with knitting, but I'm just kind of like, yeah, I like that we can discuss stuff. That's
but
kind of just...
in some ways, like, that's another interesting thing about a knitting group, or a kind of collection of people who are knitting, because you might have what you're doing with your hands in common, but you might not necessarily have anything else in common at all. And I think one of the groups we go to, when we were first there was a lot of variety in age, and these days, like, we're becoming the younger people, I would say. Like, there used to be people a lot younger than me, and I was like, oh, I'm the older now.
I don't remember that.
I'm sure there was once a girl who was like 20.
Oh really? That's
like, oh, baby. So like, you kind of, I guess it's kind of like anything. It's like going to school or going to work. You've got something in common, and you've got loads of stuff that is that's completely different. I think,
if I can be so bold as to say so, like, the secret to a good knitting group isn't everyone being the same and similar. It's about that tolerance of the diversity in the knitting group, of opinions, of like, I have my limits, I will say that. Like, there were some that gets to a point where I'm just like, no, that
I'm not gonna like everyone.
Yeah, but most like opinions that don't directly affect people, like quality of life and stuff, that's just like a genuine disagreement. I'm just like, cool, my knitting group is interesting, you know. Yeah, just to kind of round that up, I mean, it's the whole like, you do you again. So I'm happy for people in the knitting group to disagree with life and world and the universe, and also like the things that they choose to knit and the materials they choose to use. But I still think obviously stuff about, you know, use a sturdy yarn for socks, put in your nylon or a more maybe environmentally friendly substitute. Long wools are good, like Blueface Leicester. We got a lot of sweater yarns. I would argue non-superwash for garments is really good. You can often get away with sort of more frail fibers if it's not superwash treated, because the kind of fibers collaborate a bit more and kind of nest together a bit, so you get a more whole fabric that will last longer. It's kind of like, you know, if you knit with Platelope, which is completely unspun and it just falls apart if you touch it, but when you knit it into fabric, it's quite sturdy.
Was that just a list of your main things to keep an eye on when you're looking at yarn?
For instance, I'm just listing examples. What do you think about, like, when you make choices for yarns and how long it will last?
I was just thinking about how when you're knitting, you're constantly making decisions.
Yeah.
Constantly. And when you're new, it can be really intimidating because you really consider all of the choices, like, oh, if I do this, it'll be like this, and if I do that, it will be like that.
That fear that you haven't thought, that's something you haven't thought of, that someone more experienced would be like, oh.
Yeah,
you know,
and also like FOMO, fear of missing out, like, oh, but I've done it like A, but it could have been like B, and it would have been like that. And it's like that when you're designing and you're coming up with, you know, your own ideas as well. It's really intimidating, and then it gets to a point where you've done it so many times before that you just kind of do the same thing most of the time because it's your pattern, and sometimes you might switch it up, but then it's sort of, you're still making decisions, but it's like your decision is to fall in with your pattern.
Yes, but sometimes I feel really bad if I do something different. Like if I've done 3 patterns one way and then I want to do a 4th one that kind of fits into that series, but then I'm like, I want to do the construction differently, I have a better idea for something, and I sort of feel bad that I haven't gone back and done that for the other ones.
Oh yeah, got you.
Which is ridiculous, because there are many ways of doing things. It's not like one way is better, even if maybe I've ended up with an opinion after having tried them all, because opinions.
So many opinions. And one of the opinions that you've been floating for years now was that I should start a podcast. And that I should get back into designing knitting.
Yes, I keep trying to make you, just because, you know, it's not like we have enough things in common with the, you know, struggling with PhDs and just general knitting grief, but also just, yeah, I think you got something to add to the podcaster world, and you already know designing and have vented so many ideas and opinions about fit that I would like to see out there.
No pressure, Anushka.
But also I am being a horrible friend because I know how difficult it is to balance PhD life and self-employment. So yeah, don't do it, but do it.
Well, you got so far because I started my YouTube channel this year.
Yes.
That you've been a guest on already.
Crimson Stitchery. So I think that's a wrap, because it's getting awfully dark and who knows when the people I share house with are gonna come home. So yeah, I want to live on my own. We've been like scrolling through Rightmove today and just like, I can live there, I can live there, I want to go there. What about that? No, that's dodgy. But maybe better in a few years.
Yes, exactly.
So, yeah, we're gonna go back to doing that now. But thank you for being on my podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, may come back, you know, in 2 years. So yeah. See ya. Bye.
Bye.
So yeah, that was Anushka, who has the Crimson Stitchery podcast, and yeah, thank you Anushka so much for joining on the podcast, and thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.